Iris was telling us about the economic challenges that China faces, the outlook for the economy, and of course this is getting harder given the new COVID infections continue to rise despite strict lockdowns. Our co-anchor David Ingles joins us now. David, put these numbers into context.
Yeah, so I had a look at the numbers about 2 Sundays ago, let's put it that way, right? So it took about 7 to 9 days for numbers to double, and then that went down to about every 5 days it doubled. And this week on Monday, November 5 to be more specific here, I'm just looking at my data just to be more specific here. On Saturday the number was at 4,300. Yesterday it was at 7,300, right? So essentially what you're seeing is very, very early signs that this might be going up exponentially. Now the reason this is perhaps different from what you saw in that other spike you see in your graphic right now is that back then that was mostly, if not purely, Shanghai. Now we're seeing most of these things, Beijing only 78, right? But at 78, that was, as you guys point out, the highest in about 5 months. Guangzhou is what's concerning because, as Heidi was also pointing out, this is a key economic hub. It's the second district that will be locked down from about 20 minutes from now. And we're going into that lockdown in Liwan district goes up until the end of Sunday. That's on the back of the first district, which is locked down, which was Haiju. Now, the reason I sort of bring up a lot of these sort of places right now is we were talking with SocGen yesterday, their chief economist Yao Wei, and essentially what she's basically saying is that, you know, are we at a turning point? You're starting to see more and more local governments across China overwhelmed by what's happening right now. So we could be at a turning point where, in her mind, whether China likes it or not, they might be actually forced to look ahead and look for maybe tweaks or an exit, which, by the way, could come not so soon. That could come next year. But in any case, of course, fine-tuning and these subtle tweaks to the tone from onshore and local media as it pertains to the narrative, as it pertains to COVID. And that could actually drive markets, right? That's the other thing that we have to talk about. But as things stand, we could be getting the latest case numbers, and that could come any time now. That's the nationwide new local COVID case numbers.
Not to mention just how expensive it's been to run COVID zero, and you take a look at, you know, debt to GDP numbers that are certainly trending in the wrong direction for a country that's supposed to be looking at deleveraging. But Dave, you mentioned the markets. I mean, does these numbers, does this temper the optimism from, you know, the cohort of investors that are still seeing a possibility out of COVID zero sooner than next year?
Well, I mean, you could make the argument both ways, right? One is this does give certainly an indication, because the overall strategy is to still stamp out the outbreaks, right? The more and more these outbreaks get, you know, the speculation on the other side of that would be it then becomes almost impossible to stamp out outbreak, right? So that's almost the two extreme versions of the speculation. Now, when you look into next year, right, and to your point, local governments, it's very expensive, right? That was one of the key investment themes that economists and investors have really latched onto in China this year. You know, the amount of spending the government has put into things like infrastructure to at least put a floor in growth. That comes into question next year because local government finances, that's something we need to talk about a little bit more maybe next time, that might come under strain. There's not a lot of capacity there because of everything that's been spent this year on things like testing. So where does that money come from next year? They probably need to raise more bonds, raise more money in the bond markets in order to obviously get that more bang for your buck, as they say. So we'll continue to track this very, very closely, and we'll really find out what markets do in about just under an hour from now. Back to you guys.